Yeah, we see financial rewards, not just stock prices, but higher profits, higher productivity, attracting more creative employees. There are studies that support all of those different pathways. So that's right. So businesses are getting something positive out of it, and so it's really important that they're
So
not, but they also are going to have people that they're sincere to get that benefit.
Right.
yeah,
I know we had Todd Sears on the podcast. Actually, we've had him on twice, and he talked about the return on what he calls the return on equality. And I, John and I were chatting before we jumped into this interview about the whole idea of, are these companies, are they is the culture of that company more open to, and maybe innovation or differences in thought, and all of that is what's helping folks, versus companies that are considered to be traditionally more rigid, less open to innovation. Those kinds of companies are the ones that aren't seeing the benefit because they're not actually providing that kind of support or being open to their employees.
Yes, that's possible. That's possible. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and it's consistent with those broader kinds of measures that I was talking about. It's complicated though, and I think it's important to respect those complications, but they help point us towards ways that we can do this better. So there have been many studies about diversity of different kinds. And the people who are in those fields looking at race and gender diversity of workplaces, they say, well, there's at least the potential for that diversity to lead to more creativity, more new ideas and innovations, different things emerging because you have different people in the room. But there's another side of diversity, and that is that it can sometimes make things harder. If people don't understand each other, don't understand where each other's coming from, or if in some cases there can be outright conflict sometimes in more diverse workplaces. So you have to figure out how to harness the good side of diversity, and a lot of that is going to be through management practices that are going to help that help get the company going in the right direction, not the wrong direction with regard to diversity. So it won't happen on its own, but it does take people who are conscious of it. I think it's probably most likely it takes people who are very sincere. And and I'm sure Todd would attest to this as well. I mean, I've talked to people in big corporations who sound more dedicated than many activists that I know. I mean, it's quite impressive. There are people who really genuinely want to do the right thing in these big companies, and if they're smart strategic thinkers, they can make huge changes. So it is very important on all those different levels to have that kind of diversity, but to have a company that's going to use it in the right way.
yeah. You do bring up a good point. I think we talk about inclusion, just thinking that it's going to be the panacea for everything, but there are some challenges that you do have to balance. And as an executive, you're responsible for balancing that appropriately for all your employees, but as well as for your shareholders and people that you're accountable to. And it's not always as easy as as we might want it to be.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier with health and mental health, and I think I can't remember who it was that we had on the podcast. Maybe it was Todd again. When we were talking about this, the idea that if I see someone, my company is respecting someone else, and they're making policies and bringing inclusion in for those people, I actually feel more included myself. That my company isn't just siloed and thinking about one small narrow group of people, that can maybe give people a boost to their loyalty, a boost to their dedication, a boost to their feeling included. I think it was Gallup used to have a question: do you have they had a survey question in the workplace trying to define whether or not employees liked their workplace, and one of their questions was, do you have a best friend at work? Right. Well, it's kind of almost similar to that, where you're kind of feeling like, I feel like a part of something. I feel like I'm a part of this. And if I feel like I'm a part of something, I want to see it succeed. They're may it be maybe that is what's happening here, is we're seeing a boost in productivity because people feel like they are a part of something, that their company is loyal to them.
I hope so. I hope that that's what people are feeling. And I think, I think if companies can demonstrate that they're seeing their employees, I mean, they're really seeing them, who they are in whatever kinds of position they are in, I think that can be very powerful. I still worry about it though. I think, we're seeing all this backlash against critical race theory, I'm not sure everybody really even knows what that is, but or diversity trainings. Donald Trump, when he was president, signed an executive order saying you can't really have diversity trainings anymore, not those that have certain kinds of characteristics. And I think it suggests that there's something going on. We're kind of coming back to what I think is a point that we thought maybe we had gotten beyond, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but there are clearly some people who are, I think, not feeling included, and we may have, speaking for myself, maybe some different political values than those folks do, or different political opinions, but somehow or other we have to come back to figure out what it is that we have in common in many ways. And I think in a workplace you have something to work with there, so to speak. You've got the mission of the employer, the things that we're doing together, and hopefully that can be a unifying perspective. But yeah, I guess I am personally kind of not as optimistic about that view that we will all feel more included if somebody else feels included, because it doesn't seem to always work that way. But it's something we need to go back in and start maybe thinking about it in a new way, given what's been happening.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. David and I always get a little bit a little stressful when there's a Democrat in the White House, because it seems like things become a little bit more sneaky, and then all the things, everybody goes to the states and they try to make changes at the state level. Whereas when there's a Republican in the White House, they're a little bit more bold and brash, and you can actually see what's going on a little bit more readily than, because we're all separated in our different states, right? So, but you bring up a good point, and I think that's why your book is brilliant, because I think regardless of what your political views are, we all want to see the GDP grow. We all want to see our company perform better, whether we're private or public. We all want to, especially those of us who are investing in the stock market, want to see our stock prices go up so we can all hopefully retire at a reasonable age. We interviewed Dominic Barton of McKinsey several years ago for an article we wrote for Forbes. He's not working at McKinsey anymore, but he told us, and I thought it was pretty profound. He said any executive who cares about bottom line growth needs to be concerned about inclusion. And so I wonder if maybe, to the extent that anybody in the community can, is now the time to really make the economic case for LGBT equality. Like we can all agree that we need inflation to drop and the GDP to go up, right? So let's all maybe do what we need to do to make that happen. Is now maybe a right time to have that argument?
Absolutely. I think coming back from the kind of economic crisis that we experienced in the pandemic, we see how we're all tied together. Our fates are all tied in many ways. Some people have more resources than others to weather tough times, but but everybody felt that. And now, as we see this moment where the economy is heating up to the point where there are many job openings, I mean, we've got inflation going on, but we've also got situations where customer service isn't what it was because our favorite restaurants and our shops can't hire people to actually come in and do that work. So it's a different kind of quality of life measure. In the past, these kinds of moments have been really helpful for down inequalities in some ways, because it means that employers have to look a little bit harder. They don't have all the usual suspects lined up at the door to come in and work for them. So maybe they have to show that they're different. They're more inclusive of people of different sexual orientations or gender identities or races or whatever. And they may have to hire people that they wouldn't have prioritized in the past. And so we saw that like in the 1960s is a great example. That's really one of the few times that we saw big jumps in moving towards racial equality. For example, or in the 70s for women and gender equality. So, this could be that moment where there is some breaking down of discrimination, and that, those implicit or very explicit biases that people sometimes have. So that's what I would look for as a silver lining, I think, right now. And it fits exactly in what you were just saying, that we all want to see things, see the economy do well, because we all depend on it one way or another. And that's about, in the end, in my view, it's about using everybody's capacity to its fullest, and take the talents and the knowledge that people have.
Yeah, I mean, you said in your book that usually in tough times that the LGBTQ community shows its resiliency. Do you think that's happening? Do you see that resiliency right now?
I think people are working really hard to stay resilient. Yeah. I mean, God, the COVID, these 2 years have been really tough on people, and on families, and with kids, without kids. So it's been tough. I think everybody's had to be resilient. Right now, I think, this current political moment with all these anti-trans bills being passed in different places, I think, transgender people, I hear them struggling, to stay positive, to kind of not, to see, the potential for change in the future, even when things are tough right now. I think that's the value of resilience in many ways. And hopefully, some of the good things that have happened in the not too distant past, will kind of help us remember that, things go up and down, and things can get better in the future. Just because they look a little bleak now, that doesn't mean it will always be that way. So sorry, I mean, this is like my natural optimism coming out.
I guess, it's kind of interesting in the distant past. There was a lot of flight away from red states, away from places where people felt that they couldn't be there, because literally they did feel alone because there weren't communities, right? I think there are so many, even today, there are so many small towns or small cities that don't have LGBT centers, although the internet has made it much more, it's much easier to find your community. But I'm curious if you think, when we're talking about all these things that are happening at the state level right now, if you think we're going to see another flight out of these states, or maybe it increase again, and does that have an economic impact on those states, those towns, and the businesses that are there?
It could have a big impact, actually. Yeah. That ability of people to move around, is it's a good question. We have lots of people who've said, exactly that I felt like I had to leave this small town, this small rural town, this unaccepting state, and go somewhere that's more accepting. And we also hear businesses saying the same thing, actually. You probably remember when North Carolina passed the anti-trans bill a few years back. There's this huge backlash against it. And Deutsche Bank and who else was it? PayPal, I believe. These were places that were going to expand into North Carolina or expand existing sites, and they decided not to. Bruce Springsteen canceled his concerts.
That's right.
This is really hard. I'm from North Carolina, so I can tell you this is probably the worst one. Was it when the NCAA took the basketball tournament away?
I remember that. That was the one big one for me. I remember that because they made such a big deal about it.
Right.
Because
it's a religion in North Carolina.
Right. College sports are huge in the Carolinas.
Yeah. But, AP, Associated Press, added it all up, what they could find about those costs. And it was billions of dollars, almost $4 billion, just in a really short period of time that got diverted from North Carolina. And, frankly, most of the people who would be hurt by that are heterosexual, cisgender people, not LGBT people, because we're a small group, and we see companies continuing to speak out in many of these other places. I think it's hard for them to just write off, entire chunks of the country to say, well, we'll never go there. But they are much more upfront about the fact that they will take these things into consideration when they make decisions, business decisions about moving in new facilities. And I've talked to some people who said, some states has been powerful for some legislators. So those voices, I think, will still be there. And that threat of walking out, whether they're people or companies, can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So maybe someday we will see Disney World in Colorado.
Maybe Colorado. Colorado used to be ground zero, though. Really.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
we
lived
places.
there.
Yeah. Did you? Yeah.
It was kind of funny. John and I did have to laugh when
Governor Polis.
No, who was the politician from Texas that was saying, bring Disney to Texas, and we were like, wait a second, are you not paying attention to what your own governor is doing?
It was a judge from Fort Bend, Texas, who's making the case to Chapek to come to Fort Bend, Texas, because of its diversity, and I was like, wow, these times are so confusing right now.
Yeah.
When Texas is the more liberal place in the country.
That is very strange. Yeah.
So let's give listeners some numbers. You spoke about in your book, and there was a paper published in Science Direct about I'm probably not saying this right, the GIRLHO index, and which is an 8-point scale that measures how many points various countries have, and for every point they're lacking, they're losing about $2,000 in GDP per capita. You should just say it.
Okay.
Yes, please help us understand.
Yeah, that's good though. That was good.